There's an old saying that the most dangerous person in your life isn't the one who opposes you openly. It's the one who knew you before you learned how to edit yourself, before the filters, before the caution, before the version of you that the world sees. In Meghan Markle's story, that figure isn't a journalist or a royal staffer. It isn't a critic or a commentator. It's Trevor Engelson, the man who shared her life long before royal corridors, palace protocols, and carefully managed appearances became part of her reality. When they were together, there were no titles involved, no global scrutiny, just two people navigating ambition in Hollywood. Trevor, a producer, believed he was supporting a partner with big dreams. What he may not have realized was that reinvention wasn't something Meghan would later learn. It was something she was already practicing. Their marriage didn't collapse publicly. There were no dramatic accusations or media battles. It ended quietly, and quiet endings are often misunderstood. Silence doesn't mean nothing remains. Sometimes it means everything is simply being carried privately. Trevor didn't walk away broadcasting grievances. He walked away with memory. And memory has a unique power. It doesn't adjust just because someone's life evolves. It doesn't polish itself to fit a new narrative. It stays rooted in the version of someone that existed before the spotlight demanded refinement. What makes that silence unsettling to some observers is precisely that it exists. People who know little tend to talk a lot. People who know more often wait. As Meghan's public story expanded, certain accounts began to surface that felt oddly specific. Not theatrical, not exaggerated, but detailed in a way that suggested familiarity rather than invention. And when that happens, people start asking where those impressions came from. That question takes us away from London and palaces and places us somewhere far less formal: Toronto. In 2016, Meghan Markle was filming Suits, enjoying a level of success that looked solid on the surface, but still left room for aspiration. Toronto wasn't just work location, it was a social ecosystem, a city where entertainment, wealth, privacy, and influence intersected quietly. That same year, Prince Harry entered her life discreetly. Early meetings were intentionally low profile. No official acknowledgement, no press trail. On paper, it looked like a cautious beginning. But according to accounts shared years later by people adjacent to that social circle, at least one night during that period stood out. Not because of confirmed wrongdoing, but because of how close it allegedly came to unwanted attention, the kind of situation where discretion matters more than intent. Certain names being mentioned, even in passing, elevated the stakes. When royal connections are involved, proximity alone can become dangerous. The concern wasn't what happened, but what could have happened if anything slipped beyond private boundaries. And yet, nothing did. No police involvement, no headlines, no leaks. Just silence. To people unfamiliar with Meghan's Toronto life, that restraint might seem surprising. To those who understood the environment she moved through, it reportedly wasn't. Toronto wasn't merely a filming city, it was where she cultivated a parallel identity, one that revolved around exclusive social spaces where privacy was currency. One such place, frequently referenced by insiders, was Soho House. These spaces weren't typical clubs. They were curated environments designed to protect discretion. Phones stayed away, guests were vetted, conversations stayed contained. Within that world, Meghan wasn't described as a passive attendee. People who crossed paths with her often characterized her as someone who understood social mechanics deeply, who knew how to connect people, smooth situations, and maintain atmosphere. Her perceived value wasn't limited to charm or appearance, it was organizational. She understood access, she understood timing, she understood how to make people feel safe enough to relax without worrying about consequences. Viewed through that lens, the 2016 Toronto moment didn't look reckless, it looked familiar. Years before that, there was Jamaica. In 2011, Meghan and Trevor married in what many guests described as a celebratory destination wedding. Sunlit, casual, free-spirited. Stories from that event circulated quietly for years, often framed as examples of a relaxed, unconventional personality. At the time, they were seen as harmless anecdotes. Later, some observers began interpreting them differently, not as excess, but as control. Hosting, managing mood, shaping the tone of a room. Trevor witnessed that version of Meghan long before the world associated her with diplomacy, advocacy, and protocol. To him, it wasn't transformation, it was continuity. What made Meghan distinctive, according to those who watched closely, wasn't behavior itself, it was segmentation. Different people saw different versions. Each version felt authentic because it was consistent within its environment. To industry colleagues, she was driven and professional. To social circles, confident and unguarded. To romantic partners, intuitive and understanding. Those worlds rarely overlapped, not by chance, but by design. And once you recognize that pattern, her rise doesn't feel accidental, it feels deliberate. The question then becomes not how she navigated moments of risk, but why certain people didn't recoil when they encountered them. Which leads directly to Prince Harry. It's easy to assume Prince Harry was naive, that he failed to recognize warning signs. But that assumption overlooks his own history. Long before Meghan, Harry had lived under scrutiny shaped by scandal, containment, and constant supervision. He wasn't unfamiliar with chaos. What he lacked was autonomy. Within palace walls, mistakes became institutional crises. Every misstep triggered response teams, advisors, and damage control. Privacy was limited. Freedom was conditional. What Meghan reportedly offered wasn't judgment or correction, it was composure, an ability to exist alongside risk without panic, to understand how to keep moments contained. For someone accustomed to being managed, that felt like relief. Their bond didn't grow slowly. It intensified quickly, built on a shared understanding of scrutiny and a desire for control over narrative. Meghan wasn't someone who tried to change him. She was someone who seemed comfortable with complexity. That kind of alignment can feel intoxicating. But reinvention comes at a cost. Over time, physical changes became noticeable. Officially framed as refinement, styling, and cosmetic evolution, common in entertainment, some speculated about deeper motivations. Not transformation for vanity, but for separation, creating distance from a former identity. Alongside physical evolution came social erasure. Friends from earlier chapters disappeared from view. Professional contacts faded. Family relationships strained. Trevor Engelson, who knew her before narrative management became second nature, was removed entirely from proximity. This pattern repeated. New world, selective inclusion, clean break. By the time questions arose, few people remained who could compare past and present versions. The bridge had been intentionally dismantled. Still, inconsistencies surfaced. Statements contradicted earlier interviews. Claims of isolation clashed with documented travel. Details shifted subtly over time. Small changes that meant little in Hollywood, but raised eyebrows in institutions built on precision. Even official biographies evolved. Early portrayals emphasized exceptionalism, academic brilliance, linguistic fluency, humanitarian credentials. Later, descriptions became narrower, simpler, less expansive. That narrowing wasn't praise, it was containment. Institutions don't argue publicly when uncertainty arises. They reduce exposure. So, who is Meghan Markle? A woman carried by circumstance? Or someone who understood early that reinvention requires distance from witnesses? The answer likely isn't absolute. People are rarely singular, but patterns matter. For every carefully framed photograph, there are memories held by others. For every polished interview, there are older versions that didn't anticipate global scrutiny. Trevor remembers. Toronto remembers. Jamaica remembers. And the most uncomfortable aspect of reinvention isn't what gets hidden, it's what survives quietly, unchanged, in someone else's recollection. Because memory doesn't need permission to exist, and it doesn't forget just because the world has moved on.